Harry didn't just lose a case, Harry walked straight into a courtroom already knowing the ground beneath him had collapsed and still chose to fight as if no one would ever uncover it. That's the part no one wants to say out loud, the part buried under headlines and polite phrasing, the part that starts to feel less like a legal defeat and more like something far more calculated, far more dangerous, and far more explosive once you follow the pattern all the way back to where it truly began.
Holy smoke. Harry's team knew Burrows was a bust. They sued anyway. It could cost millions.
The whispers didn't start in the courtroom. They started long before that, in the kind of quiet conversations where people stop pretending and start saying exactly what they think. Words like biggest scam in legal history weren't thrown casually, they were loaded, deliberate, and echoing through a system that suddenly looked far less stable than anyone expected. And in London, where reputation is currency and silence is strategy, something shifted. No one was even trying to soften it anymore.
But it needs to be exposed. It is the biggest scam in legal history.
Then came the distraction, the perfect one. On the 4th of August, Meghan Markle turned 45, floating midair in a carefully curated black and white photograph, balloons in hand, 7 million followers watching her descend as if gravity itself had been choreographed. It looked effortless, it looked celebratory, it looked controlled. But behind that single image, something else was already moving, something heavier, something quieter, something that would land far harder than any birthday post ever could. Because within days, a high court judge would put a number on everything. Not speculation, not rumor, a number. And numbers don't care about optics. The bill wasn't small. It wasn't even large in the way people expect legal costs to be large. It was something else entirely over 34.5 million. A figure so extreme it stopped sounding real and starts sounding like a warning. Insurance covered only part of it. The rest, personal, direct, unavoidable, and by the 28th of August, the first payment wouldn't be a theory anymore, it would be due. What makes it worse is the timing, because while candles were being lit and captions were being posted, the narrative had already slipped out of control. The birthday wasn't the story. It only looked like the story. The real question circling everything was colder, sharper, and impossible to ignore. Who, if anyone, would still stand beside them publicly when this started unraveling?
Because William doesn't want to know them, Catherine doesn't want to know them. In fact, the rest of the royal family, Camilla can't stand them.
Well, she is an outsider.
The silence from inside the royal family wasn't just noticeable, it was deafening. Every absence felt intentional. Every missing message felt like a statement. And when insiders began speaking, the message didn't soften. It sharpened. Prince William and Catherine weren't expected to reach out. Not privately, not publicly, not at all.
It's August 4th, 2026, so I want to take a moment to properly say, happy birthday, Meghan Markle. Are you surprised she's apparently already gotten...
King Charles, predictably, remained the quiet exception. A card, a note, something unseen, something deniable. But even that felt less like warmth and more like protocol stretched to its limit, because everything else the public gestures. The visible connections had already disappeared, and when the palace finally responded, it did so in the coldest possible language.
However, Sykes believes Harry's brother Prince William and Kate Middleton won't be reaching out. I don't think they'll be expecting any birthday wishes from William and Catherine, the author said. Others are saying, that the Prince and Princess of Wales will not acknowledge them in any capacity. That relationship isn't there anymore. They believe Meghan played a significant role in the breakdown of family
protocol, not personal. A clean explanation. Too clean, because rules that apply only to one family stop being rules. They become positions, and positions reveal priorities. But the real fracture didn't begin on that birthday. It began weeks earlier in Gloucester, inside a meeting that was supposed to repair something, but instead exposed just how far everything had already drifted. Highgrove, a private reunion, carefully acknowledged but tightly controlled. The children meeting their grandfather again after years. A moment that should have softened everything, and yet somehow it didn't. Because while one part of the family gathered quietly, another part remained completely absent. William and Catherine, elsewhere, visible, scheduled, deliberate, not a clash, not an accident, a decision. And the details kept stacking up. No accommodation at Buckingham Palace. Security requests denied, the same refusals repeated again and again. until they stopped sounding like exceptions and started sounding like a pattern. For a brief moment, 72 hours, the narrative tried to lean positive, buoyed, energized, but narratives don't hold when reality contradicts them. And soon enough, the word changed. Not gratitude, something colder, something sharper. Fury. The claim was simple. Meghan felt like an outsider, treated like one. And when you place that claim next to everything already said publicly, the interviews, the accusations, the global broadcast, it stops being a mystery and starts looking like cause and effect colliding in real time. Because actions echo, and sometimes they echo louder than anyone expects. And then, right when the tension seemed like it couldn't stretch any further, the focus snapped back to the courtroom, because that was always the center of this story, even when it pretended not to be. 7 claimants, explosive allegations, a case positioned as a reckoning, the kind of case that promises to rewrite narratives and expose everything hidden beneath years of silence. Except something was wrong from the start, quietly wrong, structurally wrong, the kind of wrong you don't notice unless you know exactly where to look. Because everything, every claim, every accusation, every dramatic assertion rested on one man, one witness, one story, Gavin Burrows. At first, he was the foundation, the insider, the one who claimed to have done it all, seen it all, documented it all. A 21-page statement that turned suspicion into something that looked dangerously close to proof. For 4 years, that statement held the entire case together. 4 years of momentum built on a single voice saying, I was there. And this is where the story stops pretending to be complicated and starts revealing something brutally simple. Something buried in plain sight the entire time, but only now impossible to ignore. Because once Gavin Burrows stepped back, once Gavin Burrows publicly dismantled the very statement that built the case, the illusion should have ended right there. Instead, it didn't just continue, it escalated. And what came next didn't soften the situation, it detonated it. Gavin Burrows didn't disappear quietly. Gavin Burrows went further. Gavin Burrows went public, describing the entire case as something far darker than a misunderstanding. Something that pulled every claimant into a narrative they believed was solid, but may never have been what it seemed. Words like fraud, manipulation, and exposure weren't whispered, they were said directly, openly, on record. And when a man who once claimed responsibility for everything suddenly claims the entire structure was false, the question isn't whether the case is damaged. The question is whether it was ever real in the first place. Then came the document. Not speculation, not rumor, a document. Something tangible, something dated, something impossible to explain away once it surfaced. Michael Gillard didn't just hint at it, Michael Gillard published it. And Tom Sykes didn't just read it, Tom Sykes understood exactly what it meant the moment he saw it. Because buried inside that letter was the kind of detail that doesn't just weaken a case, it rewrites the entire timeline. The letter wasn't vague, the letter wasn't uncertain, the letter was precise. It confirmed that the claimants, including Prince Harry, were aware that Gavin Burrows had withdrawn cooperation long before the trial ever began. Not recently, not unexpectedly, years earlier. March 2022, a date that suddenly becomes the center of everything. The moment where the story splits into 2 completely different versions, what was known privately and what was presented publicly. March 2022 wasn't quiet either. March 2022 was chaotic. March 2022 was volatile. An incident at Graham Johnson's home, an escalation that went far beyond legal disagreements and into something physical, something unstable, something that forced Gavin Burrows into silence and distance. And just 4 days later, 4 days, not months, not weeks, the claim was filed anyway. Filed with that knowledge already in place. Filed with that instability already visible. Filed as if none of it mattered. That's not hesitation, that's a decision, a deliberate one. And by March 2023, any remaining ambiguity was gone entirely when a statement from Gavin Burrows directly contradicted the original claims. At that point, it wasn't uncertainty anymore. It was confirmation. Confirmation that the foundation had not just cracked, but completely reversed. And still, the case moved forward. Still, the courtroom doors opened. Still, 7 claimants walked in. Which brings everything back to the number. $34.5 million. Not just a cost, a consequence. Because when Mr. Justice Nicklin dismissed every allegation, every single one, the legal argument didn't just fail. It collapsed in full view. And what follows a collapse like that isn't sympathy, it's calculation. The insurance was supposed to be the safety net. Temple legal protection, policies written, risks priced, numbers carefully balanced. But insurance only works when the information behind it holds. And suddenly, the timing of that application, March 21st, 2022, sits uncomfortably close to everything else that was already known. Too close. Close enough to raise questions no one has fully answered yet. Because underwriters don't insure unknown risk, they price what they're told. And if what they were told doesn't match what was known, everything changes. If the policy fails, the gap doesn't shrink, it explodes. Millions turn into tens of millions, and responsibility doesn't disappear, it lands directly on individuals. 7 names, 7 liabilities, and that's when the alliances start to fracture. Elton John has already made it clear where Elton John stands. Baroness Lawrence has protection, but that protection comes with its own implications. And the rest? The rest are left staring at a number that doesn't negotiate. Because instead of vindication, there's a bill. Instead of accountability for others, there's accountability for themselves. And instead of closure, there's a deadline. The 28th of August isn't symbolic. It's real. It's fixed. And everything that happens next depends on what comes after that date. Because once the payment is due, once the costs are confirmed, the next move becomes unavoidable. And that's where the story tightens even further. Because the only place left to turn isn't a courtroom. It's family. King Charles becomes more than a figurehead. King Charles becomes a possibility. But even that door isn't simple, because behind one door is King Charles and behind the other is Prince William. And those doors don't open the same way. One might respond quietly, the other might not respond at all. And when those dynamics are already strained, already fractured, already silent, asking for help becomes something far more complicated than it should be.